Hey guys, and welcome to my review of the adorable Parasound ZAMP version 3 amplifier. I mean, guys, this thing is positively cute. I mean, it weighs only 7 pounds. It stands at just barely over an inch in height. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kickstart this review by sharing a story, because I don't know about you guys, but whenever I'm looking into a piece, I like to know if there's any history behind it. And in the case of the ZAMP, I mean, there really is a story here. And that's because this amplifier has basically been in production for almost 20 years. In fact, it was originally envisioned as a custom installation solution, something that was compact, that would run cool, that you could tuck away into a corner. But through time, it's actually gained a following among audiophiles as an ideal desktop solution, something that's compact, affordable, reliable, yet still has respectable power output. So nowadays, the ZAMP has become definitely a lot more popular with that crowd, and yet, despite all of that, it's remained mostly unchanged since it entered production. And honestly, I kind of like that. I like the fact that Parasound isn't one of these companies that refreshes their lineup every couple years. I think they have the philosophy of, if you build it right, then there isn't really much else that you have to do. And from what I was told, Parasound has no plans on changing to ZAMP v.3 anytime soon. Anyways, enough rambling, let's look at the amp. Okay, first, this amp, as cute as it is, I mean, 7 pounds sounds pretty light, but given its size, there's actually a respectable amount of heft to it. I mean, it feels just right. And it also looks great to me as well. Now, this amplifier is going to deliver roughly 45 watts into 8 ohms and 60 watts into 4 ohms. It can also be bridged to output, I believe, 90 watts into 8 ohms, and that's thanks in part, or largely I should say, to this decent sized toroidal transformer in here. So we have some good current that it provides. Let's see here. I like a few things about it. Number one, I like the easy access power button. It's not in the back of the amplifier in any awkward place. You'll see a headphone jack here, and what's cool about this is if you're to plug headphones in, it'll shunt the power to the speaker outputs and then redirect that power to the headphone amp. And of course, there's some resistors in place here to make sure that you don't blow your eardrums away, and plus is to keep the noise floor a little bit lower. Unfortunately, I don't know what the power is to the headphone jack, but it's still nice to have one, even if in 1/8 form. Now, turning things around to the back here, you're going to see a whole bunch of things here. We have a regular analog input. If you want to do the bridge mono, we have a RCA situation here. This is kind of cool. We have gain adjustments, so if you like a low gain sound, you can make the appropriate adjustments here, or if you like a high gain sound, again, you can adjust to taste with these little knobs right here. We have triggers for home automation use. We have our speaker terminals here, and of course our IEC plug. So pretty basic stuff, but honestly, for an amp at this price point, which I forgot to mention, $350, yeah, pretty cool stuff. Anyways, I've been rambling on long enough. Now let's go over the big thing, which is how it actually sounds. So let's get to it. Alright guys, so when you get right down to it, I don't really have a whole lot to say here, because at the end of the day, this is a no bullshit little amplifier that's designed to do what any good amp should do, which is to pass the signal from point A to point B with integrity. And when it comes to describing the sound of an amplifier, I mean, in an ideal world, an amplifier shouldn't even have a particular sound. It should just be. But you know what? I mean, this isn't the ideal world. The ZAMP v.3 is an affordable piece, and it definitely has a profile that's worth describing. So ultimately, if you're to bring home a ZAMP v.3, what you can expect is a presentation that's along the forward side of neutral. Not necessarily in the bright, ear-piercing kind of way, more like the, hey, there's a little bit of extra energy in the treble kind of way. Obviously, you'll need to hear it in order to determine whether or not it's something that you like. Now, outside of this coloration, though, I got to admit, guys, I'm very impressed by how neutral this amp is throughout the mid-range and bass. I mean, honestly, this may be one of the most neutral/accurate amps that I've come across for the price, at least within these two major frequency bands, because most affordable amps, to even include my favorite budget piece, the Vista Audio Spark, has a detectable character somewhere within these octave ranges, whether it's a touch of warmth or a touch of thinness. And the ZAMP does a great job avoiding these tropes. And outside of the top end, you pretty much get whatever the signal is like. So here's the deal. if you're looking for an amplifier that has a little bit of energy on top, but is balanced everywhere else, you like tight bass, you like clean mid-range, then this is a pretty damn good option. The sound is never really boring or dry, nor is it particularly saturated or warm. It just passes the signal along. And yeah, I think there's not a whole lot to complain about. But still, it's not perfect, so let's go over those imperfections now. Alright guys, so as you know, there's no such thing as a free lunch in hi-fi, especially when it comes to affordable pieces. And in the case of the ZAMP v.3, there's going to be some issues that I want to highlight. And the first is going to be the location of the speaker terminals. They are very, very close to one another. Now, if you use banana plugs for your speaker cables, then you know what? That's not a problem. You just plug and play. However, if you use spades or if you use thick bare wire, then you need to be careful because there is a good chance that the cables can touch each other, which can cause a short, which is a very bad thing. So I think Parasound did the best job that they could with the limited real estate here, but at the end of the day, it's something that you need to be aware of. Secondly, I said a lot of great things about this amplifier in my review so far, especially from an engineering perspective, but I need to emphasize that this amp is not a giant killer, and I say that because there's some pretty crazy reviews out there, and I want to just emphasize the point that if you pay more, then you'll get more, whether it's within Parasound's own lineup, or a good example would be the holographic audio amp 17. At $1,000 from that roughly the same power output, it is better than the ZAMP in every single way, which is exactly what you would expect, right? It's also a lot more expensive. But lastly, the ZAMP v.3 has a decent noise floor, but it's not going to be the best choice with high efficiency speakers. When I connect it to my Tecton Design Double Impacts at 98 dB, you can absolutely hear noise coming through the speakers, which is to be expected for an affordable amplifier. And it's something that most of you are never going to experience on average efficiency speakers, but it's nonetheless something worth mentioning. Now, with all of that out of the way, I want to focus on a fun little comparison between the ZAMP v.3 and my favorite affordable piece, and then I'll wrap up this review with my final thoughts. So, let's get to it. Alright, so here it is, the battle between the half pints. And before I begin, I need to get two things out of the way. Number one, I'm doing this for fun, and I'm doing this because I know a lot of you are going to want to know how the $350 Spark compares to the $350 ZAMP v.3. But I need to emphasize this is kind of a wonky comparison because the Spark is an integrated amplifier. It comes with a volume control, whereas the ZAMP v.3 is just an amp. That's it. So in order to make this fair, I'd need to add a preamp, which would add to the cost, which means it wouldn't quite be a fair comparison. But you get where I'm coming from here, and we're going to roll with it. So, how do they compare? Well, objectively speaking, I would say that the Parasound has a more balanced presentation through the mid-range and bass. It's a little bit cleaner. It's a little bit better integrated. From an engineering perspective, it's just flat out more linear. Obviously, there's more power, which means it's a little bit more dynamic sounding. You also have more features like this little headphone jack. You can adjust the gain on the back to taste. So ultimately, the Parasound becomes the easier component to recommend for a wide variety of applications because even though it's made nowadays for custom install and desktop use, there's still a lot of people that have inefficient speakers, or maybe despite using desktop speakers, you still like listening at loud volumes. The Parasound becomes a pretty easy recommendation, but the Spark, and this is where subjectivity comes in, the Spark to me is more the audiophile piece. And I say that because whenever I connect the Spark, first and foremost, the noise floor is lower on the Spark. And on top of that, the top end's a little bit smoother. Not that it's smooth per se, but it is smoother compared to the ZAMP v.3. And I noticed that when I listen to music through the Spark, I'm focused a lot more on the musical experience versus the intellectual electronic experience. And that's going to be the main difference between the two. So I would say if you're really passionate about tone, if you're passionate about a musical experience, and if you can live with 20 watts per channel, then the Spark is going to be a really good bet. However, for everything else and for everyone else, the ZAMP v.3 is going to be the better option. So that's my take on how these two compare, and now that leads me to my final thoughts. All Alright guys, so I'm going to end this on something of a personal note because I readily admit that when I got into ZAMP v.3, I didn't expect to encounter great sound. I thought it was going to be one of those affordable little amplifiers that's all about delivering great power but not much else. And instead I found an amp that was very surprising. I mean, the balance, especially in the mid-range and bass, is just absolutely fantastic. I think it's an achievement Parasound should be very proud of. And the extra bit of treble energy on top, like I said, it's a take it or leave it scenario, but I think it's something that a lot of people who are stepping into a product like this would actually enjoy. And at the end of the day, it's a well-built piece. It's a no bullshit amplifier from a company with great pedigree. It has a great warranty. I think it's 10-year parts and 5 years labor. So it makes for a very easy recommendation. And dare I say it, is an ideal desktop solution because this amplifier has enough power, I think, to satisfy most people in that environment. So yeah, well done Parasound. This is a pretty darn good amp. Guys, that concludes my thoughts and my review of the ZAMP v.3. Hopefully you guys enjoyed watching the video, and until next time, peace.